right now. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jody Dublin, she and her. I'm the Associate Director of Advising and Programs, Graduate and Professional School Lead at Beyond Barnard. And I'm joined here today with two of my colleagues. We're all going to introduce ourselves in a moment, but I want to welcome you to Requesting a Letter of Recommendation Without Fear, Best Practices. So let's go ahead and begin. Amanda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Dye. I use feminine pronouns, and I'm the Director of Advising and Programs here at Beyond Barnard. In my work as an advisor, I work mostly with folks who are interested in clinical health professions. So lots of people who apply to medical and dental school, but also nursing, PA, veterinary, all kinds of programs like that. And so I come to this event with the perspective of people who are thinking about professional school in the future and the importance of letters of recommendation for those application processes. You can find me here in Elliott Hall on the second floor. That's where Beyond Barnard is.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Kayla. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the postbac fellow at the Center for Engaged Pedagogy. Recently, I've been doing a lot of work about building relationships with your professors, and I think that's really relevant to asking for letters of recommendation from them. And I use she, her pronouns, and I graduated from Barnard last spring, where I majored in history.
And again, I'm Jody Dublin, Associate Director of Advising and Programs, Graduate and Professional School Lead. And in terms of this program, my perspective is going to be from the graduate and professional school side, talking about the importance of letters of recommendation in those areas. And I'm able to talk to everybody or folks about thinking about graduate school, planning for graduate school, what to know, A to Z about grad school and professional school. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our goals for today's session. First, we're going to understand the uses of a letter of recommendation. We're going to take a holistic view of your application, consider the importance of assembling a strong letter of recommendation team. And then we're going to understand how to structure your letter of recommendation request, and then learn how to follow up after a request. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be framing the discussion of letters of recommendation. We're going to talk about basically why are they important in different arenas. We're going to talk about your relationship with recommenders. We're going to break down how to make the actual ask. We're going to talk about following up after you've made an ask. And then we'll wrap up with some questions afterwards. All right, so let's begin with framing the discussion.
Thank you. Letters of recommendations have many, many functions. Can you do the next slide? You will need them for way beyond just college and just now. They are helpful or even necessary for college applications, graduate and professional school applications, like many of you are applying for, fellowship applications, summer programs, including SRI, which is not guaranteed, and even later on in your career. So building these strong relationships with your professors really make really long-lasting impacts in your career and professional lives. But also, strong letters of recommendation require a lot of effort. You need to develop relationships with your faculty, supervisors, and mentors, and be sure to strengthen them over time. Keep in touch with them. Also, you need to ask for them in a way that is respectful of the writer's time and support. A lot of the time, these like older faculty members in particular are really busy, and so asking them to add this extra task to their plate can be a lot for them.
When it comes to thinking about professional school applications, when you get to that stage of your life and are thinking about a professional school, which for me includes things like medical and dental school, but also law school and other kinds of programs that teach you how to specifically do a kind of job. Those programs might request a mix of academic and professional experiences. Typically, anytime you're applying for school, they're going to want some academic letters. But programs may ask for folks who can speak to your goodness of fit to their profession in particular. For example, a physician assistant program very commonly will ask for a letter from a practicing physician assistant, someone who can kind of contextualize your experiences so far. And so choosing the best writers really depends on what your schools are looking for. It's important to understand kind of what the field of play is based on the specific schools that you're hoping to apply to in the future, and kind of understanding what they require, what they prefer in terms of letters of recommendation. Your goal in creating that list of writers overall, which could be 3, 4 letters, depending on the opportunity, all of the writers should be able to provide some important context about your skills, the competencies you have, the ways in which you have developed a portfolio that is a good fit for those programs. And different writers are going to be able to talk about different aspects of that portfolio development. When it comes to fellowships, which are typically opportunities to get funding, either for graduate school, maybe a study abroad, maybe an independent research project, in some cases service projects. These are really varying types of opportunities. And because they have different remits, they can be looking for very different things. If the fellowship is for education, like it's for a graduate program, academic letters are probably going to be pretty standard. But fellowship agencies could ask for letters that address other domains of your competency as well. So a public service fellowship could very well ask for a letter that is intended to kind of assess your prospects for a career in public service in the long term. And so again, understanding the expectations of an application process early on is really helpful in choosing the best recommenders individually, but also choosing the best list of recommenders as a whole.
When it comes to letters of recommendation for graduate school and beyond, a major key of success in graduate school admissions is the applicant's fit for the program. So unlike undergrad, where you're really thinking about your fit for the school and for academics in general, at the graduate school level, they're looking for something a little bit more specific. So they want to know, are you going to be a good fit for this program? So beyond your personal statements and your transcripts, another thing that they're going to want is a professor or someone who's familiar with your body of work to talk about how well you're going to fit within the program. And that's what letters of recommendation can do for you. Letters of recommendation written by professors can put your academic performance in context. So it's not enough to just know that you got an A in a class. A professor can talk about the scope of that A. Was that A, just is this person in their first semester, or has this person taught for 30 years and can talk about your performance amongst the other folks that they've taught? So again, they're contextualizing your performance and your fit for the program. Your letter of recommendation portfolio can include a mix of academic, research, and professional recommenders, depending on the program that you're applying to and the amount of time that you've spent outside of undergrad. So that's something to remember. And then if you're thinking about a career in academia, whether you want to be a professor or a researcher, letters of recommendation are crucial to your success in your career. So it's going to be an ongoing situation where you're going to be asking colleagues or mentors or other folks in your orbit for letters of recommendation. So this is certainly something that will follow you kind of throughout your time.
All right, so now that we've had a little bit of time to kind of get the lay of the land generally, we want to talk a little bit about recommender relationships, why those relationships are important, how you kind of create them. Sorry, Jody, go ahead. So recommender relationships are a real cornerstone of what we have to say to you all today. Strong letters of recommendation are always the product of strong relationships. You can't have a casual relationship with someone and get a really vivid letter of recommendation from that person. They have to be somebody who knows you well. And as a student, it's your job to put the effort, to put the work into these relationships. You are going to have to put yourself out there to a certain extent. And, you may be a student in science classes that are relatively large for the institution, and there can be real challenges in creating these relationships. But it's a really important part of your development as a student. And this is one of the reasons, if anybody out there has ever come to a pre-health overview, I actually talk about letters of recommendation in those early initial meetings with students, because I think it's important to know going into your education. If you are in a situation where you're going to need to request multiple letters of recommendation, graduate school or professional school application process, you want to also think about how those letters are going to work together to tell a story. So when you're coming to a process like that, it's our hope that you've developed strong relationships with a variety of people who know you in academic contexts, but also professional ones, maybe in the lab or from a service activity. All sorts of things can kind of come into play here. And what you want, ideally, is for your list of letter writers to help to encapsulate the really important themes of your application. So as I said before, if you're applying for an educational opportunity, probably a letter from faculty members, that's going to be necessary because you're applying for school. But the other letters that come together can tell different aspects of your story. I always want applicants to think about the context that their letter writers are going to bring to the application process. Think about what the people on the other side of the application, the people who are going to be reviewing your application, are looking for, using any cues or clues that they give you in the actual application itself. But you also want to think about the relevance of that writer's knowledge to what they have to say. If somebody who is applying to medical school has a letter from a lawyer, that might not make a lot of sense to an admissions committee. I can imagine a scenario in which it could, but on the surface, that's not the first person you would think of. If you are somebody who's applying to graduate programs in comparative literature, a professor of computer science might not be the best fit there. Again, anything can happen, but ideally you want to be looking for folks who can speak to the qualities that are really important for the individual application processes. When it comes to choosing recommenders, I get this question a lot. A personal relationship is always more important than a famous name. This comes up a ton in the context of research. Many of you who do research may be kind of familiar with a dynamic where the principal investigator of a lab is somebody who's really well known in their discipline, but you as an undergraduate researcher might be working closer with a postdoc or a graduate student as your direct supervisor. A letter from that postdoc or graduate student can absolutely be a positive addition to your application, but another possibility, if the graduate student or postdoc and the PI have a close relationship themselves, is for them to co-sign a letter, right? So getting kind of the benefits of both, having the sign off of the PI, but also the more personalized comments of the person who works most closely with you. And in that same vein, if you're asking for a letter from a faculty member, their ability to provide a holistic perspective on your education and your application is more important than the grade that you got in the course. If you got an A, that's great. It's already on your transcript. And so if you're applying for school, they've asked for that. They'll be able to see that. What does the professor have to say that can kind of go beyond that? Is it that you got an A and that you're already working at the same level as a graduate student, that you are publishing things, that you are a person who's able to really engage productively with discussions in class? Those are the kinds of things that letter reviewers are going to want to know. And anytime you're thinking about, a list of recommenders, and let's say, you need 3 letters, you have 2 that you're pretty sure about already, and then there are a couple of people you could ask to fill that last spot. I always encourage people, think about who understands the context of the application best. Again, who's going to be able to offer comments that are most relevant to the people who are reading the application. When it comes to building these relationships, there are no real tricks here. Everything hopefully is going to make sense. So when you're thinking about academic letters in particular, building relationships with faculty members, start with the people that you like, the people that you admire, the people that you've worked with in the context of your major, or if you don't have a major yet, people that you've worked with in seminars or for courses that may be part of a major in the future. Try to take multiple classes with people who you feel like you really click with. Attend office hours. Sometimes those are opportunities for larger groups of students to be kind of working through course material, but in many cases, professors aren't doing a ton during office hours. And so coming by just to ask a question, to talk about something, maybe, something that you learned in the context of the class, but applied, kind of beyond the scope of what you learned in class. Those are all ways that you can kind of get on the radar of faculty members. Of course, getting involved with their research is a great way to get to know faculty members in more depth. But if the person does research that's not particularly, exactly what you want to do, working with them, working as a TA or say a preceptor in a course can be a great way to set a foundation for a relationship with a faculty member. And by that same token, just volunteering for things around your department. Professors in your major are going to be around when, when there are talks or other kinds of things happening in your department. So make sure that you're there, be present, talk to people casually, like have an hors d'oeuvre and, have a little chit chat with folks in your department. Those are ways that you can kind of get to know people outside of the classroom context. And when it comes to maintaining relationships, again, there's no real trick here. Try to make time with those folks to talk about your goals. If office hours aren't the best place to do that, maybe asking for a few minutes every now and again to just kind of catch up, to have coffee, or to kind of talk about where you are in your studies and where you hope to go in the future. Asking folks for advice is a really good way to keep building those relationships. And that's actually something that's really good for you as a student too, particularly if you're interested in something like graduate school, where you're going to be maybe building on something that you've learned as an undergraduate. Talking to people about, hey, I'm interested in continuing my studies with a PhD, kind of, in the field that you work in. Can we talk about programs that I might be interested in that might be a good fit for me based on my specific research interests? Those are all ways that you can kind of continue to strengthen and deepen those kinds of relationships. If you're building relationships with folks who aren't academics, that's great. That's definitely important for many application processes. And again, taking the initiative is really the thing that you need to do. If this is a person that you've met through, let's say, a volunteer experience in a hospital, asking the person if maybe you could shadow them, or asking for a few minutes to talk about their advice about your career plans, looking for research and work opportunities that align with what that person does, and thinking about how this person is helping you learn things that are important for the path that you're trying to set yourself up for. Thinking about, what are creative ways that you can kind of get more of that learning in, based on who the person is and kind of what your relationship is. If you're a person who's been out of school for a little while and you're thinking about initiating an application process that might require some letters of recommendation, the first thing to do is to think about whether the application requires academic letters. If you're thinking about, oh gosh, I have to talk to old professors, that's possible, but you could also have new relationships that might produce letters. Let's say you've taken some courses as a post-bac student and you have faculty relationships there. Those could definitely be part of an application. Or if the application is really asking for letters that represent your undergraduate experience, think about the people that you worked closely with as a student, the folks who were your advisors, maybe somebody that you worked with on a senior thesis. Those are people who are the likeliest to remember you and to know you best. And if you're a person who is maybe a junior or a senior now, but you know that you're going to be applying to a fellowship or a graduate program in the future, just not before you graduate, that's also absolutely okay. And if you are kind of making those plans for the future, I always encourage folks to have conversations with faculty members before graduation. So kind of preview your plans with them. You can definitely make the ask if they'd be willing to write a letter in a future application cycle. And then really, really importantly, it's your job as an applicant to establish expectations for check-ins with that person. So you can talk to them about what their preferences are for how often you check in, for what kinds of materials they might need before finalizing a letter. And, those could be things like your personal statement or the list of activities that you're putting together, or a CV if it's a grad school application. All of those sorts of things can be aspects of the relationship that you sort of co-construct with the person planning for this future application cycle. If you're working with folks who aren't faculty, you should definitely try to maintain relationships where you can, if it's somebody that you're working with during a gap year or years, somebody who's going to be kind of consistently in your life. But mostly it's the same as with faculty members, just kind of having conversations with people. You can do that early, but then making definite plans for how you're going to continue to check in and follow up in the lead up to your application cycle.
Thanks, Amanda. I think talking about making strong relationships with your recommenders and, being very thoughtful about who you're choosing is one of the most important parts of the process of asking for a letter of recommendation. But also in the next few slides, we're going to be talking about like going through the motions of making the ask. And then we're going to be talking about following up. But preparing to ask for a recommendation is a crucial part of this process because you want to set yourself up for success and to communicate your seriousness about applying. Setting up a face-to-face meeting is going to be the best way to ensure that you and your recommender are on the same page. It doesn't have to be in person, and it doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out meeting either. Keep it short and brief. But in your email, you want to be concise and clear about what you are expecting out of that meeting. You want a letter, some advice, or maybe some assistance. And then if you are applying for a program, it would be helpful to link to what you're applying for, like the application form. Goals of the request meeting. So now during the actual meeting, you have the opportunity to be personable. Make conversation about yourself and your goals, the program or programs that you're applying to, and how you make a good fit or how the program aligns with those goals. This creating a narrative of yourself can help build a more robust recommendation. Also, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to communicate what you need. It's impossible to be clear and explicit enough. Spell out all necessary details and instructions, even if you think they are intuitive. Inform them of the logistics about where and how they should submit the letter, when is the due date, and any other relevant details that may become important to your recommender doing the actual submission. And during the meeting, be brief. Also expressed an earnest thank you to your recommender. As you all are familiar, professors and instructors are very busy people, and so their willingness to help you with your application does take time out of their day. Also give an overview of what you were asking for. This is more so like the goals of the request meeting, like I was saying previously. And it is helpful to explain why you chose this person in particular to be your recommender. Talking about the relationship you two have, or the ways that learning under them or working with this person has impacted you in your journey to apply to this program, again, will help this person tailor the recommendation to you. Think about the sorts of context you want this recommender to provide for you in your application, and think about how their background is relevant to your goals. Also bring all relevant materials. Of course, the most obvious material is the link to the application or the application form, but also you can share your resume or CV and your personal statement, even if it's in its drafting stages. You want your recommender to be aware of what you have going on outside of your time with them and how those opportunities also help create a more round picture of yourself as an applicant. And lastly, communicate plans to follow up. Don't ghost your recommender. They want to be updated. Similarly, if you need to gently remind them of any upcoming deadlines, you should listen to how they prefer to be in contact with you. And perhaps at the end of your initial meeting, it might be a good idea to schedule a time and date to follow up with them next. And lastly, the extra tips we have are to engage with your potential recommender in ways that convey your seriousness about applying. And this can be, asking for advice, which can demonstrate your level of respect for that person, or asking questions about their career pathway.
So now I'm going to talk about kind of a worst case scenario, the thing that we're kind of all afraid of, which is what if they say no? They have two options. They can say yes or they can say no. And sometimes, unfortunately, you will get that no. So, no doesn't necessarily mean that we're at the end of the road. So, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can evaluate that no. So, there's a few different ways that your recommender might say no to you. It's likely that they will not just send you an email with the no period and then press send. So here's a little bit how we can kind of interpret what they might be asking and figure out how we can move on. So the first scenario might be, I don't know if I have anything helpful to say, right? This is especially true if using Amanda's example, this is a computer science professor and you are applying to comp lit programs. So maybe they might say, this is not a good fit. I don't know if I have anything helpful to say. So you have a few options. The first is you can evaluate that person's fit for to recommend you for this opportunity. So does it make sense for your application and among the other people that are recommending you for this person to be a recommender? Next, not like this case, if the person, maybe you don't know them very well or something, you're going to want to evaluate your relationship with the person. So maybe you thought y'all were closer than y'all really are. And this person is trying to gently tell you, I don't know you enough to write you a letter of recommendation, right? So you might want to evaluate, like, is this something that could work? Did I read too much into this, or can we make it work? And if you figure that it can work, we go to step 3, which is help them to see the vision. So going back to the computer science situation, you could say something like, when I started that class, I didn't know anything about computers or computer science. And you really saw me grow. You really saw that I, was able to struggle and, ultimately achieve a high grade. And I would like for you to talk about my persistence in your letter. And hopefully, or maybe if they're on the same page, you might be able to get to a yes. But you might need to help them see what you see, what you think that their role is going to be in this process. The second scenario is, I don't think you would be a good fit for this opportunity. So if this happens, it might be a little shocking, but you might want to take this opportunity to ask them for a little bit of feedback. So, you want to know, like, why would they say something like that, right? What do they know about this opportunity that you don't know? So ask them for a little feedback. Hopefully they'll be open to it and they will, give it to you. When you've done that, you're going to want to inventory your accomplishments and think about areas for improvement. So if it turns out that they might be right, and it might not be a good fit, you want to definitely take stock of what you've done, your fit for the program, and think about if you want to move forward or if you want to go into another direction. So also, you want to consider the feedback in relation to your goals. So again, going back to computer science, maybe this person is saying this, but they don't know anything about comp lit. So in this case, you might say, you know what, thank you for your feedback. And then privately, you're like, well, I'm moving forward anyway. So you want to definitely think about the context of the relationship, the feedback, and the goal that you have in mind. So they might say something like, I don't know you well enough. And in that case, that means it's not a hard no, it's kind of like a soft no. So you can ask them for feedback on maybe how to develop relationships with potential recommenders. But if there's not enough time for you to be able to develop a good relationship before it's time to submit this letter of recommendation, you might want to keep them in mind for the future. So you'll continue to work on that relationship. and then keep them in mind for future things that you have. And then we all know, as Kayla said, professors are super busy, so they might say, I'm too busy. Okay. So what you want to do in that case is ensure that they understand the request. So I'm thinking specifically of like the 4+1 program, where we don't specifically ask for letters up front. We ask for names of somebody that is going to be able to, that, the committee can follow up with. So you can let them know, hey, I'm not asking for a letter right now. There's, the committee is going to ask you for your recommendation later, or, whatever the case may be. And then in the future, you want to make sure that you're asking for a letter on a good timeline. So I would say specifically at least 6 to 8 weeks before asking for that letter of recommendation. So, sorry. You want to make sure that after this happens, you want to thank the person. It's not very easy to say no to someone. It's very difficult. People often say yes, even when they might want to say no. So it's very hard to say no, and you want to thank them for being honest with you. You also will want to take some time to reevaluate your list of recommenders. So especially if you're getting more than one no, you want to take some time to say, am I asking the right people? Am I moving about this in the right way? But you don't want to be dismayed. So just because you get a no doesn't mean that you shouldn't move forward with the things that you are planning on moving forward with. And then you want to move on to the next person on your list if you get a no. So let's say you get a no from someone, it's a hard no, they don't want to do it. You want to move quickly and move on to the next person. So we've talked about framing the discussion. We've talked about recommender relationships. We've talked about making the ask. And now let's talk about following up after you've made the ask. So within 48 hours of asking, if everything goes well, you're going to want to email, you want to send them an email with some pretty solid things. So first, you want to thank them. Thank you for your time. Thank you for agreeing. And then you want to share the application logistics. So in the meeting, you would have talked about the logistics, but here you want to actually share links to things, deadlines, modes of submission, so that they're clear on all the different steps that they're going to have to take for each specific request that you're making. You're going to want to include some relevant information. So either your resume or your CV, your personal statement, or if they're asking for something. So once I asked a professor for a letter of recommendation, and she asked me for a biographical sketch. What that is, I still am not sure. I told her a little bit of my life story, but I'm here, so I guess it worked. And then you also are going to want to reiterate the check-in method and frequency. So remember, during the meeting, one thing that you were going to want to talk about is the cadence of the check-in. So you want to reiterate, hey, Professor so-and-so, during the meeting, we said, that I'm going to check in with you in, 3-week intervals via email. Is that still cool with you? Just want to make sure that they understand what they signed up for, basically. 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline, if you have not heard or if they haven't submitted anything, you want to kind of gently remind them of their commitment to you. So you want to email and thank them again for serving as a recommender. You want to gently remind them of the deadline and then ask if there's anything else that they need from you at this point. So the email might go something like, Dear Dr. So-and-so, thank you again for agreeing to be my recommender for blah, blah, blah. The deadline is coming up at the end of this month. And I just wanted to make sure that you didn't need anything else from me at this point. As a reminder, here's a link to submit. Please let me know if you have any questions. It doesn't have to be too detailed. Make sure you're polite. And again, doing it 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline, just in case, changes need to be made. And then after you've received the decision, whether it's admission decision or a job or whatever, you want to inform your recommenders either way. Okay. So if you're admitted, you want to, again, thank them, and then perhaps ask them if they have any advice for your next steps. If you're not admitted, you want to use this as an opportunity for feedback if it's appropriate. So if you're applying for a biology graduate program and you didn't get in, and one of your recommenders was a biology professor, you might want to take some time to ask them a little bit about, or, ask if you can ask about how you can improve your application for the next go round. So, another worst case scenario. What if they ghost you? Okay. Again, worst case scenario doesn't always happen, but it does happen sometimes. So, if your recommender suddenly becomes unavailable, here are some steps that you can take. The first is that you want to make sure that there are no issues on your side. We've all been there, right? You thought you sent the email, you thought you sent the text, but here it is. Lo and behold, it's in your outbox, right? Or, you sent it to the wrong person or something like that. You want to make sure on your end that every single box is checked, right? You also want to confirm with the recipient of the potential recipient of the letter, so the school or the fellowship or whatever, that the recommender didn't, already submit it, and for some reason you aren't able to see that. So you want to make sure that everything on your end is cool. If that all checks out, you want to act quickly. Okay, you don't have a lot of time. So you want to make sure that you're acting quickly to find someone else. So go back to that list, reach out to someone, request a meeting, try to do it either on the phone, on Zoom, IRL, whatever is going to be the easiest method for the recommender to give you a meeting that's going to be sooner. You want to explain your situation. I would say most people are going to be sympathetic to, having been ghosted. I think we've all been there in some way or another, being ghosted. So you're going to want to explain your situation. And then after that, you want to deliver those logistics as soon as possible so that they can start working on your letter fast and make sure that the deadline is being met. One thing else that I want to say is, admissions committees, fellowships committees, all of these different organizations, they definitely have been there, right? They understand everybody runs on a different schedule. So if you think that this letter might be late or this person has ghosted, it might be appropriate for you to reach out to the admissions committee and just say, hey, I just want to let you know this letter might be late. Is that okay? This person dropped out, whatever. It could be appropriate for you to say that, especially if the person even says, I can't write this letter, kind of at the last minute. So it can be okay for you to reach out to folks directly if you find yourself in this situation. So here are some takeaways. If you don't remember anything else from this talk, remember that a strong relationship is a cornerstone of a great letter of recommendation. Okay. That is really the best way for you to get a good letter of recommendation, is going to be that you have a strong relationship that the recommender can speak to the fullness of your fit for whatever it is that you're going for. Help the recommender help you. So that means giving them all the logistics beforehand, giving them all the information that they need, reminding them, because we all forget. You want to make the process as easy as possible for them. Ask early, provide all the necessary information, and then follow up. And then finally, don't get sidelined by setbacks. So again, if somebody can't do it or doesn't want to do it for you, don't get sidelined. Move on to the next person. I think what's really wonderful about being in a university or being at a college is that you have people that are, at the top of their fields, and they could have done anything else. They could have worked in a lab, or they could have worked for, the industry in some other way. And they've decided to work at a college because they want to help people. They want to help people learn. And so don't kind of be scared of asking for help, asking for letters of recommendation, because that's why folks are here. They want to help you learn. They want to help you achieve your dreams. So don't get sidelined by those setbacks. So we've reached the end of our presentation, but we want to open up the floor to any questions that you have. You can feel free to unmute yourself or put them in the chat. We're happy to answer anything.
We already have one in the chat, which is about keeping letters on file for future applications and whether you need to ask the letter writer again. I'm going to handle this one, and I will say that it depends. It depends on a lot of things. Number one, it's a question of like where the letter is on file. So if you've got a letter that maybe you're storing in an online dossier service like Interfolio, then you don't necessarily need to ask the person again, like if you have a way to send it to programs. I know, Ozma, you may be referring to our internal committee application process for folks who are applying to medical and dental schools. It's not required that people ask their letter writer again, so if a person has solicited a letter of recommendation and then they are and then you decide I'm not actually going to apply this year, and it's sort of waiting. Our policy is that you don't have to have the letter updated, but it's a good idea to update any letters that you can. So I would say it is an important thing to do, especially because you do want to kind of keep your recommenders apprised of outcomes of application processes, for example. You want to make sure that you're letting them know if your plans change and you're not actually going to be using their recommendation at the timeline that you originally stated. So I would say best practice would be definitely to just kind of stay in touch with them. If this is a person who can provide an updated letter at a later date, then that is the ideal situation. And if you are kind of like changing your plans a little bit, if you've gone through an application process, maybe it wasn't successful and you decided that you want to go a different direction, maybe a related field, but not exactly the same, I would say then it's really important to have a conversation with the recommender, because it's very possible that you would, that their letter might refer specifically to the kinds of programs you were applying for in the past. And it's often the case that people are really willing to make these kinds of modifications if the things are similar enough. Like I always tell folks, if you're applying to a bunch of summer research programs and you're kind of applying to do the same thing just in a bunch of different places, it's not a huge lift for a person to submit letters to a few different programs. It would be a really big lift if a person was writing you one letter for a research program and then another for like a service fellowship in Uganda, right? Like these are different experiences. They're going to look for different qualities. And so the letters would ideally be pretty different. Yeah. And I see there's a second question.
I can tackle this one. Is it appropriate to ask for a copy of the letter either before or after? So this is a question I have heard a lot throughout my career, especially because you can waive your rights to access certain letters. So when you're applying, I'm sure, I think it's to medical school also, but I know for law school, you can check a box saying, I waive my right to look at this letter. And generally, I recommend that folks do waive their right to look at the letter, because that gives your letter writer more freedom to say what they want to say. And also, it can be a red flag for admissions committees to see that someone wants to see what the letter of recommendation writer is saying about them. So what you might want to do if you're curious about what your recommender is writing about is you can kind of talk to them a little bit, especially if you want them to talk about certain things. So if you have someone in your recommendation portfolio that's going to focus on one aspect of your application, maybe you can say, Professor so-and-so, Dr. whoever is going to write about my research. So I would like for you, if you can, to write about my my writing skills, or something like that. So you can have a conversation with the person about what they might want to write about. So I would say I wouldn't necessarily ask for a copy of the letter of recommendation, but I'm curious, Amanda, what you would say.
Yeah, I think, especially if you have chosen to waive your access to the document, you would need to indicate a change in that status if you did see the letter later. So let's say you, in the application system, you request a letter from this person, you check off that you waive the letter, but then through whatever circumstance you see the letter later, you would need to let that opportunity know that you actually have to change your designation, that you know the content of that letter. So another way that we talk about this is confidential versus non-confidential letters of recommendation. So a letter would be considered non-confidential if you knew the contents directly of that letter. I think this is one of the reasons why it's really important to know your recommenders well. And again, like Jody said, to have those conversations with folks about like, I'm asking you, not just because you're a person that I know, but because you're a person that I trust, a person who's observed X, Y, and Z in my preparation and is able to speak to A, B, and C in this application. If a person hears you say that and agrees to write you a letter of recommendation, then hopefully if you trust that person, you'll agree that they're, going to be in a place to actually write about the things that you're kind of expecting them to. If you get a sense of hesitation or a no from that person, then that can sometimes be a helpful indicator that that person isn't maybe the best fit for this particular opportunity. So I think, yes, there is a measure of trust that has to go into this process. But as Jody said, if an opportunity, sees that you have had access to the content of a letter, they may just assume that it's, not as frank a letter as it could possibly be. It's up to you as an applicant always to decide your designation on these things. But I think the strong relationships that make really good letters of recommendation usually lead to the kind of trust that you wouldn't need to see the letter directly. And there's another question in the chat about whether it's appropriate to ask the same writer for more than one opportunity. And I would say, yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially if it's a person that you're working with over time, right? Let's say you go into a lab as a sophomore and then the summer after sophomore year, you apply to a summer research program and your PI writes you a letter. Then you apply for a fellowship as a junior and you apply for graduate school after you've graduated from college. The same person who you've been working with all of this time could certainly be somebody who's able to write about you as you grow. And that's really what mentoring relationships are. With one aspect of what mentoring relationships can be is that like people are a part of your life and that they see your development over time and are able to kind of help support you as you go on through your next stages.
I really want to reiterate what I said before about professors wanting to have a relationship with you. They could do anything in the world, and they've chosen to be at a school. So it shouldn't be out of bounds, or it isn't out of bounds for you to ask them for more than one letter, as long as you're kind of keeping them apprised of what the differences between certain opportunities are or whatever. Because for my kind of point of view as a graduate school person, these people could be your colleagues one day. So, and even as an academic, you will be asking folks for letters of recommendation for tenure, for grants, for things like that. So it is completely normal throughout the life cycle of an academic to go to the same well for people to write letters of recommendation. Do we have any other questions in the chat? Anything else? Oh, all right. Yes, please go ahead. Menasha.
Hi, thank you so much for this information. It's super helpful. So yeah, I just really appreciate it. I had a question related to asking for a letter of rec from a faculty member who isn't in the discipline that I am hoping on going into. She's a history professor, and I am not intending on going into history. I'm not a history major. But I took a class with her, and I feel like she can speak to some of my academic pursuits or academic uh, like how I did in the class. And I was wondering if like how I should go about developing that relationship if I'm not necessarily, you know, doing research with her, or if she's even in the same department, um, or if there are like the opportunities that she would have for me would be like in a different field. So I'm just wondering, um, yeah, how to develop that relationship.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I would say that you could kind of go about it in similar ways that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So every semester, maybe you want to give her an update. Hey, professor, this is what I'm up to these days. These are my career plans. Can we talk a little bit? Because even though she is not in your discipline, she either has colleagues that are in your discipline, or she can give you kind of general advice about what to do in kind of your next steps. So you can kind of think about it as like just another person on your squad, right? Even though she's not giving you direct knowledge about whatever your specific discipline is, she can be a source of support, a source of mentorship, a cheerleader, somebody who's interested in you, somebody who's already agreed to write you a letter. So she can talk about your growth as a scholar overall. She can talk about the work that you did in her class and the skills that you've earned or learned and how they can be applicable to your prospective career path or academic path. So I would say that it's definitely worth maintaining that relationship.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else as we before we wrap up? Well, all right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day.